Now move on to questions on a statement made in the House of Commons on Monday the 9th of September, bus franchising update.
My Lords, I thank the Noble Lord the Minister for this statement, and the official opposition shares the Government's desire for high-quality public transport, and we will hold the Government to account on this. In Government, the Conservatives prioritised buses, protecting our network during the pandemic, and introducing the Get Around for £2 scheme, saving millions of people money on their commute, and most importantly, incentivising them to travel by bus again quickly after the impact that the pandemic had on travel. My Lords, we know that our public transport sector desperately needs increasing passenger numbers to make routes viable, and this is an especially acute problem in rural areas. The previous government's policy, driven by the Get Around for £2 scheme, was successful in driving up the number of passenger journeys in the year to March 2023 by almost 20%. And while this is not yet at pre-pandemic levels, our scheme is supporting the return of passengers and boosting the bus sector. So before addressing the specific issue of bus franchising, I want to ask the Noble Lord the Minister what is the government's intention for the Get Around for £2 scheme, and could this also be at risk of means testing? Will the Noble Lord rule that out? I turn now to the statutory instrument itself, which is the subject of this statement. It seeks to give to all local authorities powers on bus franchising that are currently exercised in major conurbations like London and Manchester. Broadly and generally, the official opposition welcomes the granting of more powers, the devolution of more powers to local authorities. But this particular statutory instrument, like a number of announcements from the government to date, is fundamentally bogus, and for two reasons. First of all, it is often claimed, it's often argued, that cities, towns outside London should have the sort of public transport services that London has and the sort of system that provides those transport services. And as Noble Lords will no doubt be aware, the bus service in London is provided by private companies, but operating under concessions that have been granted to them competitively by Transport for London in a way that ensures a degree of coherence and system in the operation of the bus service across the conurbation. The fares risk, which is the crucial question in all of these things, the fares risk is borne by Transport for London. The bus companies themselves simply provide the service for a fee. Now, the truth is that to do this is not something that just happened overnight, that TfL suddenly found a way of doing this overnight that nobody else had ever done. Transport for London, in various guises, has been operating transport services in London for over 150 years, and bus services going back at least to the foundation of the General Bus Company by the French company, actually, that was founded, I think, in the 1860s in London, and is the core, the historical core of what we now call London buses. So the capacity of most local authorities to deliver these services is extremely limited, and they do not have those routes or those abilities. Where, out of nowhere, are they to conjure the ability to set up a bus concession management system? The second reason that this is a fundamentally bogus statutory instrument is the cost of doing it. The fact is that running bus services on the sort of basis on which local authorities wish to provide them is very, very expensive and requires large amounts of subsidies. My figures might be slightly out of date. When the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, the last Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, left office, the subsidy to London buses was of the order of £450 million a year. The last I heard, and it may not be totally up to date, was that under his successor, the cost of London buses is of the order of £700 million a year. Now, that is in a very large city, of course, but £700 million a year is a huge amount to have to find in order to subsidise bus services. Throughout the country, local authorities are going to have to subsidise buses if they're to provide the sort of services which this statutory instrument and this government is holding out as being possible. Where is the money for that going to come from? Without massive investment in both capacity and in the subsidisation of operations, this statutory instrument is fundamentally meaningless. So does the government intend to publish a full assessment of the expected impact of this policy on the quality, frequency and accessibility of bus services, and will the noble Lord the Minister commit to assessing the relative impact of this policy on rural communities in particular, as opposed to urban communities? Finally, my Lords, the official opposition, as I say, supports the desire for improved public transport. We generally support the increase of powers to local authorities, but this policy appears to put showmanship ahead of practical improvements. The government has yet again got their priorities wrong, focusing on who runs the local bus services rather than on delivering the people's priorities, which are the quality, frequency and reliability of our public transport network.